Welcome to the Membership Guys podcast. Kick-ass advice and tips for membership site owners.
What's up, everyone? Thanks for downloading the latest episode of the Membership Guys podcast. I am your host, Mike Morrison, and in this show we dispense proven practical tips and advice for membership site owners. Thank you so much for choosing to spend a little bit of your day with me. And I'd like to reward you by giving you one hell of an awesome show. In today's episode, I'm joined by Janet Murray. Janet Murray has been a journalist for the past 15 years for big national newspapers over here in the UK, for magazines, for big name websites, you name it, Janet has probably written for it. And as well as being a journalist, she also helps people with their PR. Having been on the front lines and been at the coalface of what journalists are interested in, what they're looking for, and actually how you get their attention, Janet's helping other business owners to get their story out there through traditional media, online media, and so on. And this is something I was very excited to talk to Janet about because it's something I know very little about. I have very little experience with myself, and I think it's something that for membership site owners and for small business owners in general, we kind of almost have a fear of. You know, traditional print media, stuff in the big name newspapers, that's for bigger companies, right? That's for more interesting companies than us. And so sometimes that mindset, I think, can lead us to not even thinking about pursuing PR and pursuing media attention as a way of getting our story out there. But of course, as membership site owners, a lot of us are either doing something very unique within our space, or we are positioning ourselves as thought leaders and experts. And what better way to really capitalize on that and to really tap in to that thought leadership and those kind of unique things that you do with your membership than to take advantage of traditional media. So Janet very kindly and very generously shared a lot of amazing value bombs in this interview. Seriously, you want to get a notepad and pen because Janet just delivers over and over again on awesome advice and tips on how to get your story out there in the media, particularly for membership site owners too. So without any further ado, I'm going to jump right in now to my interview with Janet Murray. Okay, today's guest is a journalist, PR coach, and author of the brand new book, Your Press Release is Breaking My Heart. It's actually a longer title than that. Bollocks, I'm going to start again. Sorry. Okay, gang, today's guest is a journalist, PR coach, and author of the brand new book, Your Press Release is Breaking My Heart. That's the short version. I'm going to let her tell you the long version. And of course, she runs a membership site teaching people how to do their own PR too. I'm very pleased to welcome Janet Murray to the Membership Guys podcast. Janet, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Now, what is the full title of that book, by the way?
It's Your Press Release is Breaking My Heart, a totally unconventional guide to selling your story in the media. I should know, shouldn't I?
There we go. Even you trip up with it. They're the best kind, I think. Yeah, somebody will come up and tweet what the acronym for that book is as well. You can just refer to that from now on.
Yeah.
So, obviously, PR, it's one of those areas that I think when obviously people are setting up their membership and they're running a blog or doing a podcast and all of that, they're so preoccupied and so focused on the online side of things, the dominance of social media, content marketing and all of that. And I'm sure there's people out there who think that traditional PR is a little bit old hat. Are they wrong? Where does PR fit in today's landscape?
I think they're definitely wrong. And of course, I would say that. I would never advise that people do PR in isolation. And actually, we should probably back up a little bit because I find sometimes people are a bit confused by what PR actually is. It took me a while to discover this. I've been teaching it for a while and I realise people actually don't know what it is. I mean, when I talk about it, I tend to talk about it in terms of getting coverage in newspapers, magazines, radio and TV, and of course, online publications.
Yeah.
And while I'd never say to anybody, you should solely use that to promote yourself. I think it's one of those things that you should be using in tandem with your social media and your advertising or whatever it is that you do to promote your business. And I do think that lots of particularly online business owners, they kind of miss a trick because it's another way that they could be promoting themselves that they often just kind of ignore or put off. And the people who do it, people who do invest time in it, then they really do see the rewards.
Yeah, and I think, speaking for myself, certainly, and the sort of things we hear from our own audience, I think people don't think about approaching the press or trying to get any kind of media coverage because they assume that journalists and media outlets simply won't be interested, that they're too small to get anyone to pay attention to them. How do you overcome that? How do you get noticed? And is there any truth in that? Can someone who is just creating a membership site on their own actually get coverage in traditional media?
Yes, definitely. But you have to be clever about how you go about it, basically. And the thing is, people thinking that they're too small, it's not really about how small or big you are. It's whether you've got an interesting story to tell.
Yeah.
And you can have the largest corporation with a load of money behind it, but if they don't have a great story to tell, then they're not going to get coverage either. So the key thing is about finding the parts of your business, or not necessarily your business, but finding the bits of what you do that could be interesting to journalists and then turning that into a potential media story.
So where can you start with that? What sort of stuff should you be looking at? Because I think the other side of things, and I've certainly, I remember working with somebody years back where they sent over a press release to me that they were going to send out to see if I could kind of flower it up. No idea why. I'm nowhere near a copywriter or anything like that. I think they just meant put in some words that had more than 2 syllables. And it was a sales promo. And it didn't get featured. And I'd imagine there's a lot of people, when trying to handle their own PR, that's what they do, right? They just write pitches.
Yeah, and that's why my book is called Your Press Release is Breaking My Heart, right? Because I've been a journalist for like 15 years. That's my background, writing and editing for national publications like the Guardian. I was going to say the Journalist, like the Guardian, the Telegraph, the Independent, the Huffington Post. So I have been that person at the other side of the desk who's getting these dreadful press releases, which are essentially, like you say, sales pitches. So why would anyone be interested in reading about that? People are interested in story. So when people first sort of say, oh, I'd quite like to get featured in newspapers and magazines. So the first thing I get people to do, I can walk you through the kind of process I get people to go through in order to get some PR. So the first thing I'd say to them is, what is it you're trying to achieve? So as with anything in your business, you don't spend time or money on something. In this case, it's just time, really, without having an objective. So often when I'm working with people who run their own, entrepreneurs or have their own sort of businesses, they are looking to get credibility. So obviously being able to put on your website as featured in the BBC, the Huffington Post, CNN, New York Times, whatever it might be, wherever you are in the world, then that obviously gives you instant credibility by being able to do that. Sometimes people are quite literally wanting to sell widgets, so they might want to sell more of their memberships or whatever it might be. And sometimes people are looking for it as a kind of, it's almost like a brand builder. So they're looking to get more speaking opportunities, or they're looking to get a book deal or something like that. So they want to raise their profile and raise awareness of their brand and what they do. And so it can be a really good way to do that. But I think it's really important to get clear on what it is that you're trying to do. Now, it may well be that you're trying to do a little bit of all of that, but the more clear you can be on what your main focus is, that will help you with the next step. So the next step I get people to think about is, okay, well, if that's what you want to achieve, who do you need to get in front of? So sometimes people have all these like exciting, I want to be in Vogue, or I want to be in FT or whatever, or I want to be in the New York Times.
Yeah, cover of Times magazine.
Yeah, I mean, we all want that kind of thing, don't we? But actually, is that realistic? Yeah. But also, it's kind of like, is that going to get you in front of the people that you want to reach? Is that going to help your business in any way? Because if it isn't, if it turns out that the people you want to get in front of read some really like niche industry magazine, then that's where you need to be, and you need to be in those places. So there's no good you putting all your resources if it's just like an ego boost, basically. So I get people to think really carefully about who it is they want to get in front of. And then once they've said, I want to get in front of they've worked out their target audience, once they've worked out who they are, then it's like, what do they read, watch and listen to?
Yeah.
And then people often get a bit stuck there and they're like, well, how do I find out? Well, just ask them. So I've got a book coming out. So I've been in my Facebook group today asking my members, because they are essentially my target audience. I've been saying to them, what do you read, watch and listen to? And I've asked them to tell me about, what they, in terms of national news that they consume, but also professional publications that they read and podcasts they listen to, and so it's been really interesting, and that's basically what I say to people. Just ask them, do a little survey, or if you've got a Facebook group, you've got an audience, just kind of ask them what they're engaging with, and that will give you a sense, I think, of the kind of places that you should be trying to get press coverage. And then the next step is, okay, well, you've got a short list of maybe 3 to 5 publications or programs that you want to get featured in. Then this is the bit that a lot of people miss out. It's like you need to study them like you're studying for an exam. So with my journalist hat on, I spent years just sitting there with people sending me press releases or ideas. I'm like, why on earth do you think that I would want to write about that? I work in the education section. Or why on earth do you think that the business section would want to cover this? Come on, and you just would get so much stuff that was irrelevant, that even if you've just done your homework, you've really read the publication or listened to the program or watched the program, and you really understand it. So your idea is really kind of that's going to put you ahead of the pack totally. Just the fact that you'd just be amazed how many people would pitch to like a paper like The Guardian or something without having read the section. And it seems like common sense to me that you don't. I mean, I wouldn't pitch to a podcast without having listened to it and know a little bit about it, but it's amazing how many people do. So that's really kind of your next stage, and from there you're then going, okay, well, you really look at the, say it's the magazine you want to get into, you really look at it really closely, look at the kind of content they run. What you'll probably notice when you really look at something, and I mean really read it, is that they might have a regular section. So they might have their back page every week, might be an interview with a business owner, or it might be that on page 17 they have a Q&A with somebody, and you'll start to kind of see these patterns, and you'll start to see, okay, well, maybe I could offer to be the business owner on the back page, or I could offer to. So it's about, instead of you having some ideas and then trying to kind of trying to see, just go around and ask people, please take this. It's more like you looking at where you want to be and seeing how you could fit in. So it's actually the opposite of the way most people approach PR. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's kind of, I suppose, comes down to, for that final stage, finding a way of making the decision of the person you're pitching as easy and as hassle-free as possible, because I'd imagine, and I'm sure you've seen this more times than you want to recall, where the pitch is basically, I've got this story and they're expecting you to figure out where it fits.
Yeah. Exactly. Have you worked on a newspaper before? Because you sound like you have. That's exactly it. Yeah.
No, we and the point you make about actually researching amongst your own existing audience in your Facebook group and so on, that's something that membership site owners probably don't tap into as much as they could, remembering that actually you have a ready-made focus group within your member base. Even if it's just 20, 30 people, if you're just starting out, these are people who, assuming your ideal audience, forget the demographics and all that sort of stuff, assuming your ideal audience is someone who is willing to put their hand in their pocket and pay for something that you are selling at the end of the day, that's the best focus group you're going to get, surely.
Yeah, exactly. And not just for your PR, but, I ask questions. I've got a podcast as well. So, I'm planning some blog and podcast content at the moment. Can you give me some ideas of things you'd like to hear about? It's exactly the same thing you would do probably with other parts of your business. And they're going to tell you, what they read, what they listen to, what they watch, which is going to give you a really good indicator of where you need to be if you want to find more people like them. So like you say, it's like a free focus group. It's like perfect.
Absolutely. And, when you mention about podcasting and, reaching out for podcast interviews, you wouldn't do that if you hadn't actually listened to the podcast. Yeah. That's the same for ourselves in inviting guests onto our podcast or reaching out to other podcast owners. I know some more seasoned podcasters will almost test people who contact them and suggest themselves as a guest, because the typical line is, I love your podcast, I think I'd be a really good fit. And so they test them and say, okay, what's your favorite part of the podcast? What's your favorite episode? And quite often people can't answer, or it takes them 3 or 4 days to answer because they've never actually listened to the podcast. They just looked at someone who's a big name and thought they've got a big audience, so I want to be on there just for any exposure. And like you said, it's no good doing it just for an ego trip if it's not the right audience.
Exactly. Yeah.
So when it comes to actually reaching out to people and making that suggestion of, you had this Q&A section. I love the Q&A section of your magazine. I'd love to be a guest on there. Here's some stuff I would talk about, or something like that. From that initial kind of pitch, how important is building the relationship and building your contacts with journalists if you want to make sure that it's not just a one-hit wonder in terms of the PR that you're getting?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question there. And I think there's no reason why you can't cold pitch. If you see a magazine or a newspaper, online publication, you think I've really got some value to offer there. No reason why you can't cold pitch. But obviously, if you've already warmed them up by building a relationship with them on Twitter, for example, then that's a really good thing to do. So what I always encourage the people I work with to do is to, once they've kind of got their target list of 3 to 5 publications or programs, then find out who the relevant editors are and start to kind of stalk them on Twitter, basically, and make a Twitter list. And just kind of hang out and see what they're talking about, see what they're sharing, see what kind of, most journalists, I mean, I certainly have got pet subjects that they like writing about. Right. And if you kind of hang out on their Twitter timeline for a bit, you'll probably start to see that they might have hobbies. I like running, and so if somebody approached me and has kind of running related story, I'm probably going to be more interested in that, even though I write about education. But if somebody came with a kind of running story or something, I'd probably take more notice. Or I like music as well, so I've said yes to music stories that I think maybe other people might not have done, because personally I really like music education, and so you can find out an awful lot. You can do a little bit of stalking, a little bit of listening, and then what you can do is just start to gradually kind of share something that they've written, or share something that they've shared, or just comment or engage with them. And I know, I mean, at the moment I've got to the stage now where I do a lot more coaching people how to get in the media, and I do a little bit of journalism. But when it was like the other way around, I know there were people who just totally stalked me on Twitter, which is great. And then when they had a story idea that wanted to run past me, when their name popped up in my inbox, I knew it was them from Twitter. Or they might say something like, "Oh, do you remember we had a chat about this new policy or whatever?" And I think it's like anything, like we were at this conference together, weren't we? And a couple of weeks ago at Content Marketing Academy, and there was a guy who came up to me and basically said, "Hi, I should be your business coach." And I just hated that. It was just like too much, and it's like, and there were other coaches there who I just got to know and chatted to over a few days, and if they'd said to me at the end of 2 days, "I'd really love to work with you, why don't we have a chat?" Different story.
Yeah.
I think it's that whole thing. It's just relationships, isn't it? And journalists are people too. They don't want you to, they just want people kind of like selling to them all the time. It's build a relationship, try and understand them, try and understand where they're coming from and what they're looking for. Definitely.
And, one side of, I suppose, PR and media coverage that I've always wondered about is, obviously there's a whole thing of you putting the pitch in and you finding publications or what have you that you want to be a part on. But when it comes to being somebody who a reporter or a journalist contacts for a particular piece that they're writing, so if they've got the list of people they can call on, either as, to contribute a quote or to be a talking head on a TV report or something like that. How does that typically work? Is that just the result of years of relationship building, or are there any particular sort of tips or techniques where you can put yourself in that position to be the person, at the end of the article where it's, we contacted X, Y, or Z for a report?
Yeah. Oh, totally. You can work your way into that position. So when I first started teaching people how to do their own PR, I started quite high level, and I started kind of like, here's how to write a press release and a pitch, and this is what journalists are looking for. And I realised gradually that I was probably pitching it a bit too high, and I'm actually maybe starting and keep making things more complicated than they needed to be. So now I start somewhere different, and I call it like the low-hanging fruit. So basically what I try and get people to do is to connect with journalists who are already looking for help with stories. Yeah. So for example, in the UK, and there will be them for all different parts of the world, we have this journo request hashtag, and which journalists use when they're looking for help with stories. So you or I could just go on there now, and we would probably find loads of requests from journalists who are looking for people with specific expertise or experiences or whatever to share.
Yeah.
And I've just connected somebody up via a journal request today. Actually, somebody was looking for an unusual wedding proposal and things like that. It could be anything from that, or it could be, a business related or whatever. And the thing is, so somebody said to me, I was having a chat in my Facebook group with somebody about this earlier. Okay, well, this is all very, very well, but what if I don't see anything that relates specifically to my business, like today or tomorrow? And I'm so like, look, these journalists are people that often, sometimes they write for one publication, but sometimes they might be freelance and they write for lots, and sometimes they write for quite high profile publications. So why don't you see if you can help, even if it doesn't directly impact on your business? Maybe it's about you introducing them to a friend initially, or maybe it's about you saying, oh yeah, my brother had that, I can put you in touch. And it's, again, it's what we were talking about before about like warming them up. So even if you don't see anything that you think, specifically, I can definitely help with that right now, although I'm sure most people will, then just see if you can help in other ways and start to build that relationship. Because again, if I introduce a journalist to you on Twitter because you can help with the story and I can't, then they're going to remember me. And when I have got a story, then I can go back. And of course, you can then be mining their contact details as well. So if they're on Twitter looking for stuff, and you're also learning as well. If this journal request hashtag is like, you're learning about what stories journalists like to cover and they don't like to cover. So you're learning there. The other thing you can do, as a little tip, is sign up for a trial of these journalist request services, or they're called like media inquiry services. And basically, journalists get this free, but there's quite a few of them. One's called Response Source, one of them's called Gulkana, there's Source Bottle, there's Help a Reporter Out in the US. And basically, people can pay to subscribe to this service where they get daily alerts from journalists who are looking for help with stories. And most of them do charge, although some of them don't, and some of them are better than others. But basically, even if you sign up for a trial for a couple of weeks, you're going to see those requests coming in. You're going to clock the names of journalists on publications that maybe you'd like to connect with, so you can grab their details and get it on a spreadsheet. And you're also, again, learning about the kind of stories that journalists are interested in. You're starting to get a sense of the kind of stories that float their boat. And I've just recently, I have done in the past, but signed up to a 2-week trial for this Response Source service. And so I've been getting emails like every day, like loads of them from people from like, the BBC, ITV, because this is a UK thing, this one, Telegraph, whatever, looking for help with articles. And there's quite a few I could help with, or certainly know people who could. And I've had, like, one of my clients actually, she was in Mother and Baby magazine. She has an app that she created because her kids wouldn't go to sleep at night. So she created an app to help kids go to sleep. And she saw one of these requests, and it was, they were looking for somebody to talk about getting their kids to sleep in Mother and Baby magazine. She responded and she was in, so this stuff is easy. These are journalists who are already looking for people. The other bit of advice I give people is to help make it easier for journalists to find you. So journalists look a lot for people to talk to on Twitter. Now, if they go and you've got some kind of obscure like Twitter bio and it's got something stupid on it or something, it doesn't really say what you do. So I was doing a webinar this afternoon actually, and I showed 3 examples of Twitter profiles for people. And I think it was an expert in divorce law or something like that. And so I basically searched divorce law in Twitter and then pulled up these 3 accounts. So the best one was a lady who had a picture of herself, and it actually said in her Twitter biography, I am an expert in divorce law, or whatever it was, and here's my number. A number was on there. So it's like fantastic. And journalists, you have to remember that they don't work 9 to 5, they work 24/7. So if you have a number, even if it goes to an answer phone or something, and they know how to contact you pretty much at any time of day, then that's going to put you streets ahead of other people. So when I looked at these other Twitter profiles, they were a bit obscure, they were full of jargon, and just being really clear there can put you streets ahead of other people, because journalists do use Twitter almost like a search engine when they're looking for people to help. They also use LinkedIn as well if they're looking for people to talk to. Right. So again, I go on LinkedIn sometimes and I see people with these really obscure, like, director of commerce, e-platforms, blah, blah, blah. And you think, oh, who's going to so the example I gave in my webinar today was there were 2 people who are experts in dealing with phobias. And that's the kind of thing that journalists would, be looking. It's quite a nice, sexy subject, isn't it? So one lady just had as her LinkedIn tagline was fear and phobia expert. Perfect. The other guy had hypnotherapist, NLP specialist, director of NLP Academy or something, and immediately you're like, which one are you going to go for? Are you going to go for the one that just says fear and phobia expert? So these are all little things that you can do to help make you more findable. And also, if you're looking for radio and TV coverage, then if you've got some video, basically the first thing I would do with my journalist hat on, if somebody wanted to write for me, or if I was a radio or TV producer, they wanted to come on the show, the first thing I would do is obviously Google them to see what they've done before. So if you want somebody to write something for you, you need, if they've got a blog, great. Or if over on LinkedIn, they've got, they've been writing articles for LinkedIn Pulse or something, at least you can see they can string a sentence together and they can put an argument together. So that's the first thing you're going to do. If it's for TV or radio, obviously you want to see that they look and sound all right on TV, and they're not too nervous. And so if you've got some film of yourself talking or presenting or whatever, then obviously get that up on your LinkedIn page. So it's just kind of making yourself more findable. So they're sort of three things that I think people could do. Like they could, after this podcast interview, you could go off and have a go at doing these three things, and it would already get you a little bit further in terms of your profile. And of course, then once you've connected with journalists, then it's about being reliable and delivering what you say you're going to deliver, timely fashion and all that kind of stuff, which I'm sure people know, and making yourself available. So sometimes people will kind of like say, oh, well, I think at first you have to make yourself available sometimes at odd hours. So, if you get the graveyard shift reviewing the papers on the TV channel that no one watches, get your experience there first. I mean, I go and also sometimes people get a bit snobby about it as well. And they get snobby about local coverage. And I'm like, well, actually,
it's
coverage, and it's also getting you experience. And I go and review the papers at my local radio station like about once a month, and it's helped me. I've got coverage for other things that I've been doing, because I go to other people on the station and say, oh, I'm the paper reviewer, and that the paper review thing probably doesn't bring me much business or whatever, but it's really good fun because there's always fun things happening. But I've also met like journalists I was one journalist who went to work on 5 Live there. You're just starting to build your media connections, and it's broadcast experience as well. Since I started doing that, I'm so much more confident on the radio. So then when I go on a show where I think, oh God, there's going to be more people listening, although having said that, no one ever says that they've heard me on like BBC London or Radio 4. They all say they've heard me on the local radio station. But this stuff is, I think you've got to walk. You've got to walk before you run. What's the phrase? You should try and run before you can walk.
Yeah.
You need to build up some experience and do it, kind of gradually sort of stage it up. So does that kind of help in terms of ideas as to how you can sort of start building a profile?
Absolutely, especially the stuff about, I think, video and radio as well, because actually it was great. I was crossing off on my questions because I was going to ask how would your approach differ for those, and it totally makes sense. And again, I think it is just thinking smarter and strategically about how you use the stuff that you are already creating, or using that as a reason to start doing video. And like you said, any sort of experience in doing this, even if it is at the smallest local level. It's one thing if a journalist takes a look at your website and sees that you have a podcast or that you have a YouTube channel, and they can watch some videos and assess you from there. But if they go to the site and they find that not only do you have video and audio available, but you have video and audio from being on an actual proper radio program and from being on an actual TV program, not just shot against, a white bedroom wall or something like that, then that's going to be a difference maker.
Definitely. Yeah. I think, it's kind of like show, don't tell, show what you know rather than tell people about it.
Absolutely. And, with our audience in particular, and I suppose everyone who's doing business online, for membership site owners, I think we tend to have like 2 main groups. You'll have the thought leader, authority, expert kind of person who, they're trying to stake their claim as the go-to person in their industry. And we talked, about how you can approach that and kind of look out for opportunities and pitch and so on. And then you have the more business to consumer, the hobby-based stuff where you're not really necessarily trying to become the expert on knitting patterns, but you maybe have the only membership site around knitting patterns, or you'll have a membership site around a hobby or a topic that maybe no one would even think that there'd be like a membership around. In in terms of the difference between media coverage and press opportunities, is there a big difference, would you say, between like business press and how you would handle that versus, the wider, broader publications?
No, actually, one of the things that I do as part of my business, I run these sessions in London every month called Soulful PR sessions, and I get a journalist to come along and talk every month. And last month we had James Hurley, who's the editor of the Times Enterprise section, so like the business editor. And it's really funny because although you would sort of think, oh, he's a business editor, it's kind of, going to be a bit dry or whatever. He used the same phrase as I would use if I was getting somebody to sell a story into a consumer magazine. And he said, people and personalities, people and personalities.
Yeah.
And that's what radio and TV producers say. So actually, I would say that you approach it in exactly the same way. One little tip, actually, I would give to people is if you want to get press coverage for your business, you kind of need to stop talking about it, which sounds counterintuitive.
Right.
But so say somebody's got a membership site, and it's the same with podcasters, actually. They often come to me and they say, right, okay, I want to get press coverage for my membership site. I want a journalist to write a piece about my membership site. So you have to think to yourself, well, would Doris travelling up on the train to Edinburgh want to read a story about some person they've never heard of who's got this thing called a membership site? Yeah. Or, Jackie, the nurse on her word, So people generally are probably not going to be interested unless it's a really unusual thing like naked tennis or something, or I don't know. But people are probably not going to be interested in the fact you've got a membership site, but you can look around the edges of your business to find stories, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But the other way you can flip it is, so Colin Gray, who I think who's the podcast host, so he came to me a little while ago and he said, I really want to get some coverage for my podcasting business, but also podcasting more generally, because in the UK, people don't know enough about it and whatever. So I said to him, well, instead of trying to get people to write about your podcast, because that's quite boring in the nicest possible way, but people to read about your podcast, how about you flip it round and you think about what questions people have got around that, and I said, and I know people ask me all the time, should I start a podcast if I've got a business? Can it help me market my business? So I suggested The Guardian has a small business network, and I suggested to him that he pitched them a story, which was, should I start a podcast, or can a podcast help you to market your business? They said yes. He wrote a piece which was very, kind of like, these are the reasons why it could be a good idea. This is how to get started. And so that's a practical, useful piece of content for that audience, who are small business owners. So that's one thing you can do, is kind of flip it round and teach people. So I've written a whole series of articles for The Guardian's Small Business Network about how to write a press release that sends the most traffic to my website, how to get radio and TV coverage, how to write a pitch to a journalist. So it's thinking about, there's a huge appetite online, particularly for how-to content where you're teaching people stuff, basically. Yeah. So if you've got a knitting membership site, then instead of, you've got several options, could you, just as I was talking to you before, I was kind of thinking, wouldn't it be great to approach the Guardian Small Business Network with a piece about, whether a membership site could help you grow your business? Absolutely. That's the way to think about it. So you could either go down that route, and you could go to the business press and offer to write something for them, a really kind of, how-to piece about how, whether or not a membership site can help you grow your business, and if so, how to do it. Or you could teach people the knitting stuff. So you can think about, my target audience is people who, they knit in their spare time, and this is the kind of stuff they read. How about I do, 20 things you can knit in 20 minutes or something like that, and so it's the teacher role can work really, really well. And I've written how-to stuff on PR for the Entrepreneur and various other places. So that's one thing. There's a huge appetite for that kind of thing. Am I okay for time? Because I've got
absolutely.
Okay.
That's totally fine.
Once you set me off, I can't shut up.
Oh, it's awesome. All good stuff.
So the second thing I get people to think about is to look around the edges of their business for the story. So journalists are generally not interested in writing about your business unless it's like really unusual and really different. And most of us, I know that my business, I think it's fascinating, but I know that, like Josie Josie, the nurse from Northampton's probably not going to be that interested in reading about it. So what I've done, I've got press coverage I've got this kind of handout that I give my students when I'm working with them. And if you can imagine, it's in the middle of it, it's got like your business or brand. Around the edges, it's got all the areas of your life which intersect with your business or brand. And so it's like family and relationships, money, work, life and death's the other one that I've got. And basically what I do is I kind of come up with ideas that are not about my business specifically, but give me the opportunity to talk about it. So I'll give you a couple of examples. I wrote a piece for the Guardian's. This is the women in leadership section. And basically something happened to me where I was getting approached to do speaking gigs, and people would come to me and say, will you speak at my event? And then I'd say, yes, I'm free. That sounds great. What sort of rate did you have in mind? And they'd say, oh no, we weren't hoping to pay you. And we were hoping you'd do it for the exposure.
Yeah.
So of course, that's an issue that other people will identify with. They won't identify with my PR coaching business, but a lot of people would identify with people asking them to work for free in, different. So I suggested this to the Guardian's Women in Leadership section. They were really pleased with the idea. So I wrote this piece about why women shouldn't work for free, and then got loads of comments, loads of shares, loads of, I had some quite high profile people as well who tweeted me about it, like sort of politicians and stuff who read it and got back to me. So that was quite good. And that sent traffic to my website, and people engaged with me. I know for a fact I've got people who have come to my events, who are in my membership program now, who first found me through that article. And then you can flip it, you see, because then I wrote a piece, people were saying to me afterwards, well, that's all very well, but sometimes there are times when you should work for free or could work for free. And so I did a piece for Entrepreneur about 5 times when it's okay to work for free. So you can certainly work that idea. And the other thing is I work, I'm not there at the moment because I don't podcast from there, but I work in a shed at the bottom of my garden, and it's quite pretty. And, in the UK, we call them chic sheds. And it's a bit of a thing.
They're all the rage now.
Yeah, they're a bit cool. They're a bit of a thing. I didn't realise this until I got one, but they are a thing. So people are very interested in that because they're wondering about, wouldn't it be nice if they worked in an office, this shed at the bottom of their garden. So I had like a full page worth of coverage in the Metro, the big commuter paper in the UK, which was a piece about these sheds. But in it, I was there talking about my business, and I was talking about how, and the quote is just like, oh, I love working here because I run workshops here and I teach people PR. And basically it was I was able to talk about what I did. And I've done a few articles like that for different publications about the shed, and it's just given me an opportunity just to say, well, this is kind of what I do here. I run workshops here, but I also film my videos from here and whatever. And the one about speaking, actually, basically if you're writing an opinion piece about speaking, it's a massive advert for the fact that you're a speaker, so and you're available for bookings. So it works like that as well. And interestingly, I'll just give you one last example. I wrote a piece about miscarriage at work. Again, it's for the Guardian. I don't just write for the Guardian. It's just the examples that come to my head. That was about dealing with miscarriage at work, and it got 10,000 shares in 24 hours.
Wow.
And I didn't really mention my business very much, but I was just it was just something I felt passionately about because I'd experienced it. And again, the traffic to my website was massive because people were having a look at it and going, oh, this lady does this. Oh, that's quite interesting. So then they were signing up to my opt-in. And I was sat at an event in London when this woman was sat in the front row, and I said, oh, how did you find it out about me? And she said, oh, well, I read your piece on miscarriage. And I'm like, God, So I hope that kind of just gives you a few examples of how just looking around the edges of your business at the stories that people will actually find interesting and identify with is where the real gold is. I don't know if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I think part of the problem, I'd imagine, is people think that, getting press attention is such a big thing that they only have one shot at it. So obviously, if they've only got one shot, they need to get as much in about their business and stuff as they possibly can do. But end of the day, you mentioned it before, personality and people, and you mentioned stories. It's about stories. And when it comes to like writing blog content for yourself and stuff like that, you wouldn't write a weekly blog article where essentially you just write a sales pitch over and over again in every single blog article, word for word. You'd find the angles, you'd find stories to tell, you'd find experiences to relay, you'd find how-to material to put out there. And, I love that whole thing of looking around the edges of your business, because if you're talking about your life and your history and your experiences and your opinions, if you're discussing that stuff and your business is a big part of your life, then naturally it's going to get a mention, whether the intention is to get exposure for your business or not, because if you're talking about your day-to-day, your business is part of your day-to-day, so it's going to come up organically.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And something's happened to me over the last few days, which is quite interesting. I suppose we should share that I wrote a piece for the Huffington Post. I'm a Huffington Post blogger, and everybody should do this. You pitch your first piece, get your first piece past them, then you get a login, and you can write pretty much whenever you like. And it's a platform that obviously, that can promote you beyond maybe your own blog.
Yeah.
I wrote a piece which was, I don't really know why I did it, really, because there wasn't actually that much relationship to my work. But I wrote a piece about why I wear makeup when I'm running, right. And because people just were asking me about it. And if you want to know what it's the same with your content marketing. It's about thinking what people will be interested in, what people ask you about all the time. Yeah. And so I just wrote this sweet little piece, put a few photos in it, because it was just after the London Marathon. And basically I was saying I've run the London Marathon twice, and both times people have just been more interested in the fact that I have makeup on at the finish line than the fact I'd run 26 miles. So next thing, I swear to God, within a few seconds of me sharing it on my Facebook, I got a message from someone at the Daily Mail saying, really, really like your story. Could we have it as well? So they paid me to write a piece for them. It hasn't run yet. And then yesterday morning, I got a Twitter message from somebody from the BBC, a documentary maker, saying that we read your piece about wearing makeup when you're running. Wow. Would you like to, would you be interested in helping us out with this documentary? So I did a conversation yesterday. I did like a sort of, I did a Skype interview on video today, and they probably tested me out. Apparently the casting director wanted to look at me. So it may not go any further, but that kind of gives you an idea, that's not going to happen if I'm talking about my business, But and how I managed to do it, I managed to kind of shoehorn it in by saying that, basically I was really determined in everything I did in my business and my work, and that reflected into my, running or whatever. I managed to make some kind of link between my work. And but that's probably quite a good example, and it's also a good example of the more, what you said before about it's not just a one shot thing. It's more stuff you've got out there, the more journalists are going to find you. So the more media articles that you can place, the more people, I get phone calls all the time from stuff that I've written. I might get a phone call one day from Radio Scotland and say, oh, we noticed you wrote a piece in, 2012 about this. Do you want to come on the radio? And, it's like evergreen content that's going to, generate more coverage for you. So I think that's probably a point worth making. Definitely.
And I think it just goes to show you never know what's going to take light and capture people's interest as well. Not just from readers, but two or three other media outlets wanting to jump on that as well. Awesome. Yeah. All right, so we've mentioned it a few times already. I've got to ask you about the book. At the time that this podcast goes out, it's either just coming out or it's just come out. One of the two. Tell me a bit more about it. I love the title, Your Press Releases Break My Heart. I don't even need to ask where the inspiration from that comes from. But when did you decide to write a book, and what can people expect from it?
Well, as I said at the beginning, it was inspired by my 15 years in journalism, just kind of like my heart literally like sinking as each press release came through saying, my business is great. I've won an award for being the tidiest office in the UK or something. And just seeing this whole industry who was sending stuff that people didn't want. So it's like, so my inbox was just full of stories that I wasn't interested in. And then I was scratching around trying to find things that I was interested in and knew other people would be interested in. So it kind of came from that. But the real motivator was that often these really terrible press releases would come from small business owners or PR companies that were representing small business owners. And it would really gall me because I'm a small business owner too, and I always have been. I've always been freelance, and my business has kind of grown and expanded. And it would sort of gall me to think that somebody like me was paying for this stuff. So that's where it came from. That's where your press release is breaking my heart comes from. And what I really wanted to do was to write something, because established business owners might come to me, they've been doing it a while, and maybe they've got a 6-figure income or something, and they might be able to afford to hire me or a good PR company to help them raise their media profile. But actually somebody who's just starting out with their business or in the first few years of business, they don't have the budget to hire a PR company or to coach with me. So I wanted to be able to provide a kind of step-by-step guide for somebody like right from the beginning. So the first thing in the book is like, what is PR? What we talked about right at the beginning, and helping people get really clear. And I think it's really confusing out there now as well, because there's so much content. It's like, well, what is is there a traditional media anymore? And just helping to sort out, is the Huffington Post traditional media? Is the Guardian is, but what about Entrepreneur? Where does that fit in? So it's kind of like helping people, walking them through all of that sort of stuff, and then basically how to generate story ideas that journalists will be interested in, how to put pictures and press releases together. I'm not very keen on press releases, but I do share how to do it, because there are times when actually it can work quite well. And so basically it's just like a step-by-step guide for somebody who's pretty much never done this or not done much of it, that walks you through all the steps that you need to do to get press coverage. And it's very practical. I use a lot of stories in it because obviously that's what I tell stories. And the feedback I've got so far I've obviously had my book review team on the case, and they're really loving it. And I think finding it really simple, because that's what I've always tried to do, is to try and demystify it, because it's not rocket science, this stuff. I've always believed that anybody with a great idea can ring up a newspaper or send an email pitch to a magazine. There's no sort of bar to entry in any way. It's just kind of knowing a little bit about how journalists work.
Yeah.
And the more that you understand that, because you don't want to be wasting loads of time on this stuff. The more you understand it and how journalists work and what they're looking for, then the better you're going to be at this. So it's just a really kind of practical, hands-on guide. It's very honest and very blunt in places. But that's with good intention to really just help people nail this and not spend loads of money and not spend loads of time on it.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And literally not saying this just because you're on the show, but it will be something we'll definitely pick up, because I don't think I've actually come across anything like this here that is tackling this area with practical stuff. A lot of the stuff you see around the subject of PR, you'll click on an article and it's not really about PR, it's about social media. Yeah. Or it's basically just how to submit your release to as a PR web, I think is the site, or how to use Help a Reporter Out or something like that. So it's an area we haven't delved into at all ourselves, but
The other thing that I've included as well, I think, because the media landscape is getting so complicated, is also how to pitch yourself as a podcast guest, and how to pitch yourself as guest content for blogs. Because I think I'm all for being really strategic about this. Sometimes people say to me, "Oh, I'd really like to get traditional press coverage," and I'll be like, actually, in terms of achieving what you want to achieve, you might be better going after blogs or podcasts. Yeah. So I've included that as well, and also how to pitch yourself as a speaker. So I go a little bit more broad, but it is all kind of really just like practical stuff that hopefully makes it kind of really simple. And as I say, I start with the easy stuff, the low hanging fruit, the stuff that doesn't involve having to ring journalists up or send emails, just so you can kind of get used to it, and then when you feel more confident, you can move on to that stuff.
And that's the thing, if you're just a small business owner who hasn't done anything like this before, then that low hanging fruit, that straightforward stuff, could make a massive difference, or at least enough of a difference for you to be able to kind of say, right, all right, we need to take this seriously now and come along and, hire someone like yourself or take a course or something like that. It's funny as well when you talk about the inspiration for the book and the fact you mentioned it was actually from seeing stuff coming from PR companies as well. I always remember, this goes back about 5 or 6 years, there was somebody in a business network I was part of who ran a PR company, and it was just her, and she was relatively young, but I remember seeing a tweet from her basically saying, "Oh, if business doesn't pick up, then I'm probably going to be packing this in 3 months' time." And that was just like, even
that's
it just on so many levels, it doesn't show it. Not just is that bad PR for your own business, but also shows that you can't do PR for anyway. So
Well, that's one of the things that the last chapter, actually, at the beginning, I say, look, I say hands up, I don't think very much of PR companies. I've met a few really good people, but I've seen a lot of bad practice. Yeah. But the last chapter, I say, look, if you got to the end of this and you still think you want to outsource, here's how to find someone good. And the signs I think of someone good is if they can promote themselves well and their business well, then, but if they can't promote their own business, I mean, somebody who tweets, business is bad, you're not really going to have that much confidence in them to help you promote your business. I'm looking for, I say, you should look for somebody who knows about content marketing and doesn't just know about it, but they're doing it themselves. And you're looking for all those extra bits as well.
Absolutely. Janet, thank you so much. I've been furiously scribbling down notes and stuff like that for myself, so I'm going to be harassing all of our local papers and all that sort of stuff soon. Before we wrap up, let our listeners know where they can find out a bit more about you, where they're going to be able to get their hands on the book, and go for it.
So my website is janetmurray.co.uk, and in terms of social media, Twitter's probably where I hang out most, so it's @Jan_Murray, but I've got an amazing Facebook community called the Soulful PR Facebook community, and if you want to come over there and sort of chat with people, there's just amazing things going on there at the moment where people are helping each other out to get coverage, and I'm in there answering questions every day. And the book, or the book, as I love to hear you say, the book. Actually, I'm turning into Scouse now, aren't I? So I'm not doing you very well, am I? You can get on Amazon, and it'll be available on July the 7th.
Awesome. Janet, thank you once again so much. I've really enjoyed talking to you and getting the benefit of your experiences and your insight and your tips, and I look forward to reading the book. Good luck with it.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Janet for taking the time to join me on the Membership Guys podcast. What an awesome interview that was, right? Hit me up at Membership Guys. Let me know what you thought of that interview. If you're anything like me, hopefully you enjoyed it. You got a lot of actionable tips and advice from it, and I'd love to hear your feedback. And of course, if you've got something positive to say, do head over to our iTunes page and leave us a nice little 5-star review. And obviously, if you go to themembershipguys.com, you'll see all the related links to Janet's stuff, to her brand new book, to her website, janetmurray.co.uk, beneath this episode as well. That's it from today's show. I'll be back again very soon with another installment of the Membership Guys podcast. If you've enjoyed today's episode of the Membership Guys podcast, we invite you to check out the membersiteacademy.com. The Membersite Academy is the essential resource for anyone at any stage of starting, growing, and running a membership website. So whether you're still figuring out what your idea is going to be, or whether your website is already up and running and you're just looking for ways to grow it and attract new members, then the Membersite Academy can help you to get to the next level. With our extensive course library, monthly training, exclusive member-only discounts, perks and tools, and a supportive, active community to help you along the way with feedback, encouragement and advice, the Membersite Academy is the perfect place to be for anyone looking to start, manage and grow a successful membership website. So check it out at membersiteacademy.com.